Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for my mystery, thriller, gothic and dark academia genre wrap-up. So as you guys may be aware, recently I started doing genre wrap-ups, so that means that once every 3 months I talk through all of the books that fit particular genres throughout those 3 months. So this is the third genre wrap-up in the cycle, and today I'll be talking about the mystery, thriller, gothic and dark academia books that I read throughout the months of June, July and August. I've actually really enjoyed doing it this way because apart from anything else, it does show me what sort of books I tend to read more of. These genres are the genres that I probably read the least of, so you will see far less being talked about today. Of course, that does mean that when we come around to fantasy and magical realism, which is my most read genre, there are a lot of books, but today we only have 5 books to talk about. This month is also the month where I will be showing you my stats, so that will be a separate video where I talk through all that sort of stuff. So the genres I read throughout the 3 months, the page numbers, the categories, young adult, etc. All that sort of stuff. That will be a separate video that will go up at some point more towards the sort of second half of the month. I'm not 100% sure when, but it will come up at some point this month. So today, like I just said, we're going to talk through mystery, thriller, etc. Mystery and thriller are the books that I have read throughout these last 3 months, and like I said, there's only 5 of them to talk about, so we shouldn't be super long chatting today. So the first book that I want to talk to you about today is Dreaming Spies by Laurie R. King. This is, I'm not 100% sure where this falls. I think it's like the 12th or 13th book in the series. If you watched my historical, literary, contemporary, classic non-fiction wrap-up, you will know that I did say that this really probably belongs more in historical fiction, but the subgenre is mystery, and because I knew that I wouldn't end up having a huge amount of books to talk about during this genre wrap-up, I thought that I would save it to here. So this is a historical fiction, but it does feature mystery as its sort of main plot point, but I do feel like it probably, if it were to be shelved in a library, it probably would be shelved in historical fiction. So, like I said, this is the, I think, 12th or 13th book in a series. This is actually a retelling of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. So we follow a young woman called Mary Russell. In the first book of the series, she is a teenager who goes to live in the Sussex Downs in the UK with her aunt after her parents die, and she is a little bit of a loner, a little bit of a lost soul, and one day she quite literally runs into the retired detective Sherlock Holmes. Throughout their first interaction, he realizes just how observant and intelligent and in a lot of ways similar to him she is, and so he sort of starts a unofficial apprenticeship with her. The first book is set in the late Victorian era, so definitely not a thing that would happen these days where a unattended teenager would be in a position where they would become incredibly close to a 60-year-old man. But back then, obviously, that was something that could potentially happen. So they develop an apprenticeship, and then later in the books, she becomes his partner. She also has her own career. She is actually a theologian, and she is also an Oxford Don. This is actually one of my favourite series of all time. Having said that, I haven't actually read all of the books in the series. So this is my first time reading this one. I really enjoyed it. It actually follows Holmes and Russell as they are investigating, acting more like spies for British intelligence than they are acting like detectives for a local police force. So we follow a bunch of sort of mysterious stuff that's going on in Japan to do with the Japanese emperor, and they have to solve a series of theft, murders and all sorts of things like that in concert with some of the spies in Japanese Spies. I really enjoyed this one. I love every book of this series. In fact, I love every single book of Laurie R. King that I have read. She also has another series which follows a detective in the 90s, I think, in San Francisco. So it's more of a contemporary contemporary when it was written series, and it is equally as good. And then she has a bunch of different standalones as well, and I've enjoyed every single thing that I've read of hers, which is quite a bit, but obviously not the entirety of this series, which I claim to be one of my favourite series of all time. I love her writing style. In particular, in this series, it is very academic, but that suits the character really well because Mary Russell is an Oxford Don. She is incredibly intelligent and academic, and she has a very academic mindset. So the way that and it's first person narrative, and the way that she speaks, you can really tell that she is an academic. I think it's really well written. I think the mysteries are really well written. They're woven together really, really well. The description is really great. I just really love the writing style, and I really appreciate Mary's voice, and I really love this as a retelling of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I love the characterization of the different characters. In this particular book, we don't come across Lestrade, Mycroft, or Watson, but in other books we do, and they're done really, really well as well. So I would highly recommend this series. If you haven't read this series, obviously don't start here because, like I said, it's like the 12th or 13th book. The first one is the Assassin's Apprentice. No, that's Robin Hobb. The first one is The Beekeeper's Apprentice, which I do have, but I didn't grab, so I will put an image of that here. So I highly recommend this series. Definitely really, really fantastic, and like I said, one of my favourite series of all time. I gave it a 9 in core pile, so that's 9 out of 10, and that equates to 5 stars. So yeah, that's that one. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Deadly Misconduct by R.J. Amos. This is a self-published book by a Tasmanian author, Tasmania being a state in Australia, which is where I live. Yeah, I read this and also Dreaming Spies for the, what was it for? India Chords Readathon, and as you probably know, I was the historical, literary and contemporary fiction host for that particular team in that. So this one is also one that is sort of a subgenre of mystery, but I think is more of a contemporary, just in terms of the way that the writing style comes across. But yes, it does follow a mystery. It is a murder mystery. We follow a young woman called Alicia, and she is an academic. She's a scientific academic at the University of Tasmania, and she has taken some time off because her mum was sick. And she's taken some time off working with her mum, and now she's trying to get herself back into her academic career. So actually she's not, in fact, an academic per se when this book starts. She's trying to sort of re-enter that world, and she's doing so by attending a conference that is happening at the University of Tasmania. And while the conference is happening, and it happens in the first bit of the book, and it's also on the back, so this is not a spoiler, she witnesses a killing, which she doesn't think is an accident, although that's what it's called to begin with, but she doesn't think that it is. So she witnesses this, and then she wants to start to sort of investigate. She's not a detective or anything like that, but she starts to kind of look into stuff that she can look into. So there were elements of this book that I enjoyed, and then there were elements of this book that I really didn't enjoy. Overall, on core pile, I gave this a 6.14, which equates to 3 stars. And like I said, that is because there were elements that I did enjoy and then elements that I didn't enjoy very much. So let's talk about that. So first of all, the writing style. I thought that was really, really well done. I thought that it was really good pacing, and I thought that it was really clear and concise and well written. So this also follows a first-person narrative, and I really appreciated the way that we were put into the character's head. I felt like that was really immersive, and I really got a sense of who the character was and how they were thinking about the world, and how they approached the world. So I thought that was really, really done. So I think the author is a really good writer, and I really appreciated her style and her way of writing, and like I said, the way that we were very quickly immersed into the character's head. Unfortunately, the main thing that gave this book quite low rating for me was that I really didn't like the main character. Now, usually this is not a huge thing for me. If I don't like a character but I like all these other aspects of the story, then I usually don't let that influence quite so much how I would rate the story, especially using core pile, because character is only one aspect of how we are supposed to rate overall. But of course, because we were in the character's head, and because the author had done such a great job of putting us in the character's head, it was really, really hard to escape that feeling of really not liking the person whose brain I was in. The character was really, really judgmental and really quick to act on her really quick judgments that weren't based on any kind of, they really weren't based on anything, I didn't think. They weren't based on any actual evidence. They weren't based on anything more than a feeling that she got, or anything more than her own preconceptions. And I mean, obviously we all do that to a certain extent, but when you are attempting to investigate a murder, I really think that you need to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more questioning of your own judgments, and she was really quick to judge and really quick to act on her first impressions. And even when that was really, really ill-advised, not just for her, but for what she was trying to achieve. And I just found that was really, really hard to read about. I mean, I did finish the book and I did enjoy it to a certain extent. Like I said, it was really well written. I was very immersed in the character, but unfortunately, because I really didn't like the character, being really immersed in the character weirdly put me off a little bit. So yeah, if you really enjoy unlikable characters and unreliable characters, I don't think the character was unreliable in the sense that I didn't believe what she was thinking, or that I thought, she wasn't like, it wasn't that she was actually on drugs or, drunk, or any of these other ways that people often do the unreliable narrator. But because she was so quick to judge and so quick to act on those incredibly quick judgments that had almost no basis some of the times, I found that unreliable because I couldn't rely on her thinking. So yeah, I mean, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, then I definitely would recommend. Like I said, the writing is really, really good. The author's really good at placing us in the character's head, and it's definitely worth a read. It's interesting, and like I said, it's really well written, but just be aware that the character might not be for you. It certainly wasn't for me. So anyway, yeah, so this is a 3-star, and that's that one. Next up is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. So this is actually a reread for me. I think this is the 3rd time I've read this book. I know a lot of people have spoken about how they don't tend to read thrillers or mysteries more than once because they already know the story, they know what's happened, so it doesn't necessarily feel like they already know what's going on. And so some of the points of a mystery novel or a thriller is for you to be surprised, and of course that doesn't happen. I don't personally find that. I find that I can enjoy something even when I know the twist, and sometimes it makes me go back and think about some of the stuff that happened before and what evidence might have been there that I didn't notice the first time around, and so on. So I still really, really enjoyed my reread of this one. I gave it a 7 on CallPile, which equates to 4 stars, so isn't my favourite thriller mystery of all time, but definitely something that I do really enjoy, and I do enjoy Paula Hawkins' writing. This book also features an unreliable main character. However, in this book, we are following a woman who is an alcoholic, and that is why she is an unreliable narrator, because we can't necessarily trust her memories. She can't trust her memories. She can't necessarily trust what she thinks she knows or thinks she's seen, but also she is making some decisions throughout the story that aren't necessarily for the right reasons, and so that makes her unreliable as well. So we follow a woman called Rachel. Rachel, as I said, is an alcoholic. You don't find that out immediately. If you've seen the movie of this, you would know that in the movie you find that out almost immediately. In the book, you don't really find that out immediately. You kind of know there's something a bit off about the character and her judgments and what she's saying, but you don't necessarily know what it is. But yes, this person is an alcoholic, so their memory is not necessarily reliable. They don't entirely trust themselves with what they're thinking. So we follow Rachel, who has a routine. Every day she travels on the train past a row of houses, and she watches out the window, and they always stop at a particular signal, so she stops out the front of this particular house quite frequently, and so out the window she sees the occupants of the house, and she's kind of built a narrative around these people and their sort of what she perceives as perfect lifestyle, perfect relationship. And then one day she sees something that throws all of that into question, and it makes her question herself. And then a few days later, the woman in that couple goes missing. And then we are thrown into this mystery story with Rachel at the centre of the mystery story, except that Rachel doesn't know what she knows. She doesn't trust her memory. She doesn't trust herself. She is implicated in the missing woman's abduction or missing circumstances, and it all spirals from there. It features, so like I said, it features the unreliable narrator. It also features questions about her past, questions around what her relationship with her ex-husband and his new partner is, her own actions in the past. There's lots of questions about all of those things and what the reality of the situation is. I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, it's my third reread. I still really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. Again, I think it's really well written. I think the unreliable narrator aspect of it is handled really, really well, especially considering that the idea of something like an unreliable narrator, particularly when it is due to alcoholism or something along those lines, could be done not necessarily very well. I think it's done really well here. It's used in a really interesting way, and you really get a sense of feeling really uncertain about the situation in the same way that Rachel herself is feeling really uncertain about what's going on, what she has or has not potentially done, and she just, like I said, she doesn't trust herself, and you really get a sense of you don't trust her, and you feel a lot of unease throughout the story. And I really enjoyed the ending. I knew, of course, what was going to happen, but I still think that it was done really well. The first time I read it, I did not see who it was going to be in the end. I didn't see it coming. I know other people have said that they did, probably people who have read more thrillers than I have and have more of a handle on what to expect from that style of story, but I didn't see it coming, and I really loved the twist at the end. I thought it was really well done, and yeah, it was really surprising, and I really appreciated that. Now, I did read this as part of my Book into Film Club, so for anyone that's new, I do a Book into Film Club with in real life friends. We read a book and then watch an adaptation of the book. So we read this one and then watched The Girl on the Train, and I really enjoyed the movie as well. There are definitely differences between the two. This is not my first time watching the movie either, so when I was reading the book there was stuff that I was expecting to happen that didn't happen because that's how the movie changed it, which is fine, but it does always, it changes things slightly, but that's okay. That's the nature of rereading and rewatching. Highly recommend this one if you enjoy well-written thrillers. I know some people haven't said that that's their favourite, and like I said, maybe they are a bit more experienced in the sort of thriller world than I am, and that might be why, because they guessed it too quickly or whatever. So if you're a really big thriller reader, this maybe not, I still think you probably enjoy it, but it might not be your favourite, but personally I really, really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend. So yeah, next up is Every Breath by Ely and Lana. This is the first in the Every series. This is also a Sherlock retelling. Unlike Dreaming Spies, this doesn't actually feature Sherlock Holmes or any of the characters from the original canon. So this is a modern retelling, and instead of following a version of Sherlock, we follow Rachel Watts and James Mycroft, and it's one of those books that has kind of a meta-narrative in that Rachel Watts and James Mycroft refer to themselves as Sherlock and Watson, except that they're Mycroft and Watts, so they kind of place themselves a little bit in the narrative in that way. I know that Paige from Pages with Paige talked about this in a recent wrap-up of hers, and she did say that for her that got a bit on the nose towards the end. I didn't find it so. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a good nod to the original story without being too on the nose. So for me it wasn't that, and I thought it was funny, and the way that the author did that I thought was done in a humorous way, so I appreciated that. So this is a young adult murder mystery. James Mycroft is a very kind of Sherlock Holmes type character. So he's very intelligent, very observant, very analytical, very eccentric. And then we're in the head of Rachel Watts, so we follow her story more than Mycroft. And she is his best friend, but she has recently moved from the country to Melbourne. She doesn't really want to be in the city, she very much wants to be in the country. So for her, she's kind of trying to find her place in her new environment and try to figure out what's going on, what is happening with her and Mycroft. So it's very kind of teenage in that regard. There's a lot of teenage angst and a lot of like, will they, won't they, which is often something that I find I don't necessarily always like, but I thought it was done really, really well in this one. It didn't ever get to a point where I was like, just get together or who cares anyway, but I think that might be because I appreciated the character. I liked Rachel as a character. I could see where she was coming from and the position that she was in, both from the point of view of not wanting to be in the city, although that's never been something that I have experienced because I'm quite a city girl, but I could see, I can empathise with her. I thought that was really well written. The overall story of it being a murder mystery I thought was done really well as well. Again, Paige did say that she didn't feel like, would teenagers really act like that? I feel like oftentimes TV shows or books that are written by adults but are about teenagers make teenagers more grown up than they necessarily are. However, these teenagers were in their late teenage years, so I think that when you are a young adult and you are coming to the end of high school and you're starting to question your future and what it's like to be an adult, what it will mean for you to be an adult, who you are, what your place in the world is going to be, I think you do start to see yourself as older than you are. So I do think that it's entirely possible that teenagers would in fact act this way and speak this way. I still found, like I said, there was a lot of angst around will they, won't they, and how Rachel felt about her particular situation, and that also was done really well. So it was kind of like they make themselves, they try to act like they are more mature and capable than they necessarily are or should be at that age, because they almost are adults, but at the same time you can see the immaturity, and I thought that was really well written. So I did think it was actually very authentic teenage voice. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so it's been a long time since I was a teenager, but I still thought it was really authentic and I still really appreciated the style. I enjoyed the pacing. I just really enjoyed this book and I thought that it was incredibly well done, which is why I gave it 9.14 on Callpile and 5 stars overall. So this was part of my last to read book club, which I am running with Lana from Law and Lullabies and Ellie from Earl Grey Books. This video will go up on the same day as our first live stream, so this will go up at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and then the live stream will be 2 hours later. So if potentially you're watching this in the first bit of it being up, then definitely go and check out our live stream, and we'll be talking about that. Can't promise it won't be spoiler free, of course, so if you haven't read the book and you do want to, maybe don't come along, but that's just so you know. I'm really excited to read this one, to read future ones, the rest of the series. All right. And now, the last book that I want to talk about today is The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse. I gave this one a 5.57 in Callpile, which is a 3-star rating. Didn't love this one. Didn't hate it. Yeah, it's middle of the road, but it's on the lower end of the middle of the road, if that makes sense. I did enjoy the experience and I was intrigued to find out what the resolution was going to be, but it definitely had some issues that I just didn't love. The first thing that I will say, the writing was fine. It was perfectly serviceable. It didn't make me not want to read the book, but it wasn't very particularly good either. It was a bit clunky in places, and yeah, it was okay. It just wasn't the best written book. I mean, it was well paced enough, but it just didn't, something was missing for me. I didn't think it was particularly well written, like I said. I didn't like the resolution. I didn't like the motivation of the person committing the murders, and I didn't think it really worked. Okay, so the person who was committing the murders, the main person behind the murders, the initial thing that started them down the path was completely understandable, but where they ended up going and what they ended up doing and the people that they ended up killing, there just was a disconnect between what started them on this path and where they ended up and why they ended up making those decisions. It was a very flimsy connection. So it's called The Sanatorium because it takes place in an old sanatorium in the Swiss Alps. So the building used to be a sanatorium for sufferers of tuberculosis who would go there to try and recuperate from tuberculosis. The building has since been turned into a very luxurious hotel, but there's a lot of stuff in the background of that story that is a bit like, well, what was really going on, how were they treated, etc. The author also wrote the kind of closed circle mystery aspect of a thriller. It was very kind of, and then there were none, the guest list style. So they ended up being stuck, isolated in a place due to weather, and they couldn't leave due to weather, so they were stuck there, and then there was a murderer around, and what's going to happen and who's going to be killed and are they going to solve the mystery and so on. We follow the main character, whose name I've totally forgotten even though I read it a few days ago. What is her name? Ellen. And she is a police officer who has had a traumatic experience in her line of work, plus other stuff in her personal life. She's taken leave of absence, and she has gone to visit her brother and his fiancée, her and her partner. But then there's a bunch of stuff in their background, in her history, in her past life, that is mysterious and potentially bad news. Yeah, so there's all those sorts of, it's very trope heavy, I found. There were like the closed circle mystery, stuck because of weather trope, and then there was the what happened in the past in this building, is it haunted, did we do terrible things to people in this building trope. And then there was the what happened in this particular character's past, and are they a reliable narrator, and are the people around them reliable? Was there a bad act in the past, and have they buried traumatic memories trope? So it was very kind of trope heavy. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, we call things trope for a reason. They're used often. If it's done well, that's great. So it's not that something shouldn't have tropes. That's why we have tropes. That's why we call them tropes. Trying to cram all of that stuff into one book, you really need to be doing all of it really well. Otherwise, why have it all in there? Why not just find one trope, write it really, really well, and have a really good story? But in this particular instance, I don't think that happened. I think they tried to include a bunch of tropes and didn't do any of them particularly well. So, like I said, it was 3 stars. I didn't hate it. I was intrigued to read it. I wanted to find out what happened, but it did let me down, and I didn't think that highly of how it was done, how it was written. Having said all of that stuff and talking about all of that and saying, oh, but it's 3 stars, I'm actually now wondering whether I shouldn't maybe drop it down to 2 stars. So, yeah. That's where we fall with that one. So that's my mystery, thriller, etc. wrap up for the months of June, July and August. Anyway, yeah, so that's it for me today. Please do comment below if you have any thoughts on any of these books, if you've read any of these books, if you enjoyed or didn't enjoy any of these books. I would love to know all of that. What did you read in the last few months? Did you read any thrillers or mysteries, or in fact dark academia, horror or gothic novels? I'd love to know that as well. If you would like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then please leave me some kind of murder emoji, maybe like a knife or a blood drop or something like that. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and find me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And like I said, thank you so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.